nothing matters because people die at 15, I was like, I'll show you. And that's when the eating disorder developed into something real. So that's what happened there.
Yeah, and certainly it makes sense for everything you're going through. As you well know, an eating disorder can at least allow you to feel like you have some control over
Mm-hmm.
your life, and so much
Mm-hmm.
control was taken away from you.
Yeah.
So we would certainly see that as maybe an expected coping reaction for somebody who was really struggling in the way that you were struggling. So the way that that was kind of misinterpreted, misrepresented, and communicated, it's almost like she's the major villain in my mind, because if she responded differently to you, it could have changed the whole trajectory. And this
Yeah.
is what I unfortunately see way too often in clinical practice: is the worst of my profession, the least educated, the least talented, the least empathic,
Mm-hmm.
drive the most people down this route
Mm-hmm.
with drug, because they don't understand the human condition. They
Mm-hmm.
don't understand the experience. It almost feels, Brooke, like we've lost our collective like empathy and connection to understanding what is normal, to just be in a body and
Mm-hmm.
to live this life. Life is painful. And the lack of empathy that she communicated for such a vulnerable young age for someone who lost her father is just, I think it's heartbreaking. But I think it's representative of some of the lessons we have to learn from this era in mental health, is pushing people to some idea of a quick fix and communicating that they are broken. So that leads to my next question: is how did you then interpret what you were going through? And I know this is going back to being a teenager, but
Yeah.
you're pushed into the medical side of this
Mm-hmm.
for something that I just feel is quite normal,
Mm-hmm.
what you were experiencing. How did that shift for you about how you were viewing what was going on within you?
I think the fact that I was a teenager is very important, and it also harkens back to the 7-year-olds on Lexapro, right? Because when you're 7, you are the makeup of everyone around you and everything you're learning from the people around you. When you're 15, you are all of those things you were at 7. So you're all the things that other people have made you to be and imparted on you. And at the same time, when you're at the point where you're starting to question those things and say, okay, well, who am I? What is my personality? And then you're also right in the middle of puberty. So it's just, it's not a great time anyway. But when I was, when I was, given these labels, when I was told that I had depression and anxiety and that they were no different from a diabetic who has, who needs insulin, and it was not my fault, and all of these stop the stigma things. What that actually did was tell me that I did not have the power, agency, or innate ability to change my situation and to therefore change the world around me, because well, it's not your fault if you're born with type 1 diabetes. So if it's the same thing here, if there's if it's genetic or a chemical imbalance or any of these things that I get told and everybody gets told, well, then why try to change it? Because I'm already immediately going to be working against nature. And, what power do I have there? That was the message that was said both through words and through actions. Now, you take that even a step further, and okay, the 7-year-old, well, they're just going to internalize that immediately, right? So now they have something wrong with them, and their whole world is through that lens, right? As a 15-year-old, when you're also dealing with puberty and you're dealing with the rebelliousness that comes from being that age, well, at that point, it almost felt kind of good, right? There was almost this like, you know, there was a there was this feeling of I am so fucked up that there's a medical term for it. And I deserve that. And I want, like, it made me feel special. And it made me feel like I had an excuse to be morose and dark and to, listen to obnoxious music, because I was really so fucked up a doctor said I was, right? And that was such an insidious thought process to have put into me that went on like well into my 20s and really didn't really, I think frankly didn't really lift until I finally got off all these drugs and started to have to train myself and learn a new story. But it was so beneficial. God, nothing was my fault. I didn't have to care about anything. If, if my job wasn't going the way I wanted or my experience, I didn't like it, well, whatever. It wasn't my fault. It was somebody else's fault. There was no reason for me to have personal responsibility or agency at all. But that was something that developed over time. And it's just that the seed was planted early on.
I mean, one of the key points and what I loved when I was watching everything about you is the idea of agency. You bring it up so often, and I'm a teacher, and I do my best to get these kids to understand that is the single most important thing that you have to embrace.
Mm-hmm.
You do not want to self-reliance, rely on yourself. It's okay. But one of the key points you discuss with adolescents, particularly adolescents, is how many things they actually go through, particularly to gain success in this current education system, get A's, get all this stuff. So when I teach, I see this all the time. And I can tell you the moment any of these teens experiences any kind of grief or any kind of negative emotion, an immediate reaction from everyone is, well, maybe they're depressed. Maybe they might have a problem. You should go see a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, everybody just listens. And most of these kids, though, they actually don't want to discuss what's going on. They just kind of want to live their lives and be left alone. And they want to try to figure things out. They want to learn how to cope with it. But we cut that off. They need time. And instead, we don't allow time. We tell them, oh, you have a problem.
How did we get to this point where human emotions are so pathologized and there's such a vigilance towards like your emotions as something is really wrong with you?
Marketing.
Money.
The pharmaceutical companies really have been powerful in this regard in shaping generations, because we're one of only, I think, 2 countries that receive direct to consumer advertising. And that's the power of some of these messaging, like that chemical imbalance idea.
Were you told that you had
the other is New Zealand.
Were you told that you had a chemical imbalance out of curiosity?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is insane, because it's clear that you were grieving at that particular time. So, I mean, that's just a level of insanity that's unable for me to grasp.
I mean, I had a conversation with a psychiatrist about 2 months ago who told me that depression and grief are not connected. And he said they're different. And I asked him how. I said, how do you measure it? Well, he couldn't answer that. And then he's like, because, depression is persistent. It happens after, it starts after a specific period of time. And I just was like, are you seriously telling me that if you lose your father or a partner, that you're done grieving after? Well, I mean, I think the DSM just completely eliminated the grief, the grief clause. But for at one point, I think when I was medicated, it was 2 weeks. If you are depressed because your dad died for more than 2 weeks, then, well, you're clinically depressed. It's different than your grief. One is a pathological disorder. The other one is just, I don't know, normal. Which, if you look at the history of grief practices and bereavement, I mean, not that long ago, we were wearing black for a year.
Yeah, it's such arbitrary bullshit. And, we'd have to be able to call them out on this nonsense. And that's what's concerning to me over the past 30 years is we've continued to give the medical authority more and more power where they feel like they have to have all the answers. In psychiatry, they just make shit up. Like I spend my entire adult life trying to be able to understand the human experience in context and understand history and what does it mean to be human. And I interact in our medical system and they just make shit up. Like I could never just make shut up. Like, so they don't understand that the DSM, the Bible in which they're using, they don't understand, listen, these aren't illnesses. These are some construct that were made by people sitting around a table. There's no science behind it. It's a scientific nightmare. So they use this DSM, as if it's legitimate, and they slap the label on you. It didn't seem like anyone really understood you at that time. Brooke, was there ever a plan? I mean, was there a plan to get you off the drug? Because there's a